everybody, and welcome to Polar Bears International's Tundra Connections program. We're so excited you could join us today. We are sitting on the shores of Hudson Bay. We've got Arctic winds and polar bears all around us. Lots of polar bears out there this morning, and we're going to let you take a look if any of them get close on that cam. So thank you so much for joining our virtual field trip to the Churchill Northern Studies Centre today. We're going to be talking about this amazing facility really close to where we are right now that hosts a lot of really neat research. We're going to go for about 30 to 40 minutes with time for questions. And please let us know if you have questions. You can email us at questions@pbears.org. You can put your questions in that chat window on Polar Bear TV. You can tweet us at Polar Bears or just use the hashtag Tundra Connections. So thank you so much for joining. I will introduce to you our main panelist today, our guest of honor, if you will. We might pull a few people in later as needed, just depending on what questions come in. But right now, I would love to introduce you to Dr. LeeAnn Fishback. LeeAnn, can you tell the viewers a little bit about who you are, your background, and what you do up here?
My name's LeeAnn Fishback. I'm the science coordinator at the Churchill Northern Studies Centre, the field station that Alyssa was talking about. And I've been living and working here in Churchill for about 13 years.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We are going to talk a bit about this research facility, and it's got a really neat history. LeeAnn, can you tell the viewers how this facility started?
So the study center started about 40 years ago. Actually, next year we're going to celebrate our 40th anniversary. And we've been operating as a field station for researchers and scientists to come and stay here in Churchill at the study center. We also do educational programs as well throughout the season. So we're open year-round. We are one of Canada's only northern field stations that's actually available for researchers and scientists to use year-round.
Really neat, and I've been lucky enough to stay there, which I will talk about in a little bit, and we are also going to go through the seasons of research that happen there. But first, I'd like to ask you a little bit about this brand new building that opened up in 2011, and it's just an incredibly green building and even LEED Silver certified. Can you tell us a little bit about what goes on there to make it so eco-friendly?
Yeah, so welcome everybody to the study center. Here's walking in the front door of the study center. This is our great atrium feature inside, so a real welcoming place. We also offer almost a one-stop shop for scientists. So on the side there you can see our cafeteria coming in through our gift shop and a bit of a lounge area at the front. It's a two-story building, and on the top floor is where our researchers and people who are staying with us are accommodated. And here we're just walking down the hallway towards some of our teaching space. We have 3 classrooms on site for people to use for teaching and educational purposes. And then right there at the very end of the hallway, we're just walking towards the 5,000 square feet of lab for researchers and scientists to be able to use. So a lot of researchers who come here are able to bring their samples back from the field and process them. Oh, there's the classroom. Great nice view in the classroom. And we also have a library space, so a place for people to go and read or sit quietly or to be able to write.
Very nice. There's a lot of cool books in that place. It's always fun, and games.
And some good games too,
I played Yahtzee there a couple times. Pretty neat. Can you tell us a little bit about the waste, how you handle waste out there? It's pretty neat.
Yeah, we're a remote facility, so we have to bring all of our water into the building and treat it and make drinking water. And then we also have to treat all of our sewage before we put it out of the building. So we have composting toilets is one way that we can treat our waste. And then we also have a sewage treatment facility on site that we use about 6 months of the year. So once conditions are frozen, so in a week or 2 here, we'll have to shut down our septic system, and then we actually truck our waste into town to be treated.
Oh, wow. And you guys are also very energy efficient, aren't you, out there with the lights and how much energy you're using?
That's right. We try to reduce our impact as much as possible by having high efficiency fluorescent lights, and also having our ventilation system is all motion sensor detected, so we're not ventilating the space unless there's actually people in it.
Oh, wow. That's pretty cool. Can you tell us a little bit, I know you guys attract researchers from all over the world for many different reasons. Can you talk a bit about why people might want to come here specifically to do their research?
Yeah, Churchill's a really great place for scientists and researchers to come because it's very accessible as well. It's easy to get here. For people to come to Churchill, they can either fly or they can take the train to get here and to get their equipment here as well. And also, it's in a transition zone. We're right at the southern edge of the Arctic tundra and the northern edge of the boreal forest. So people are often studying a wide range of different species here, both boreal and Arctic, as well as looking at the environment in all the seasons because we are open year round as well.
Oh, really neat. This really is such a kind of special ecosystem area here. There's just so much different stuff going on. Another really neat thing about staying at the study center is just the networking possibilities or the connections you can make with researchers from all over the place. You guys get a ton of people in that can come in and talk about the research with each other and, you know, meet new people, maybe talk about new projects going on. It's pretty nice.
Yeah, that's right. And it's everyone from undergraduate students to graduate students right up through to the principal investigators on the project. And people who are staying on our educational programs. So you might be on a school field trip and stay at the study center. You're right there with the scientists. So it's a really fantastic place for people to stay.
Yeah, it's really fun. I do think that's a really neat thing is that if you have tour groups or school groups, they are, you know, sleeping and using the same facilities as the scientists. Everyone's just under one roof and hanging out together. It's pretty nice.
Yeah, we have about 84 beds on site, so we can have as many people as 84 staying there and other people visiting as well. So it's a pretty busy and happening place.
It is. It is. Very cool. So we thought maybe we would take you through kind of an average year in the study center because depending on the type of year, there's a lot of different stuff going on. So let's start with right now. Of course, we are in the fall, and this is kind of what Churchill refers to as bear season in October, November. LeeAnn, can you tell us a little bit about what the study center does during bear season?
Yeah, during bear season, we host a few researchers, but predominantly we're doing educational programs. So people who want to come and see polar bears and are willing to stay in our facility. It is dormitory style accommodations, but they go out on tundra buggies to look at polar bears. They may do a helicopter tour and a few other tours around town. And the instructor of the program is usually someone who's either a scientist themselves working on polar bears or is someone who's in bear management or conservation.
Pretty neat. And then as it cools down even more here, of course, the bay is going to freeze. And sometime in the next few weeks, the bears are going to leave, and then it's winter. And it's going to get pretty dark and pretty cold, and that sea ice will be forming. But the research does not stop. And there's still a lot of people coming up here to do different things. What sort of stuff happens up here in the winter?
Yeah, so we have a lot of research that goes on looking at snowpack, and we also have a number of researchers looking at northern lights as well. So these are the two main winter projects that are going on. We also have projects that run year-round as well, so scientists that aren't actually staying in our facility but have projects that are operational. So we take care of those research projects for them. We have about 15 of those that are running throughout the year.
Oh, wow. That's quite a bit. And then as we warm up from the winter and we get into the spring is a really neat time here, and it's quite a special time for birders, and we get lots of birds in the area.
That's right. Spring is a fantastic time, and it's lots of light. The days are getting longer all the time. The snow's starting to melt away, and just the abundance of life is amazing in Churchill as hundreds of birds migrate back to the area. They're either migrating through or they're coming here to breed. So it's a really great time of year. I think everyone's always really excited to see the green of the tundra again.
Yeah, definitely. Must be pretty special time of year. And there's also, are there some studies that look at snowmelt going on? The impacts, or what's that?
Yeah, the around Churchill, a lot of work goes into looking at the tundra ponds around here.
Oh, okay.
So the snowmelt, as the snowmelt fills the water up in those tundra ponds again, and a lot of people are really interested in how nutrient dynamics change in those ponds, as well as the species that rely on the ponds. So this is a really great shot actually showing from the air how many of these tundra ponds there are. They cover about 20 to 40% of the landscape, and you can see a little bit of snow still in the trees there of that picture.
That's really incredible. Yeah, there are a lot of ponds to study. Oh my gosh, pretty neat. And then as we warm up even more and it becomes the summertime, there is a whole lot of stuff going on in the summer. There's the wildflowers, the whales are back, the beluga whales migrate into the Churchill River, there's seals coming here, and we have, this is Dr. Stefan Peterson from the Assiniboine Zoo. on camera now, and he was up here this summer studying different seals, and he stayed at the study center with you guys. And were you out there working with him at all, or helping him with the project?
Yeah, this is a really interesting project. One of the things that he looks at is the harbor seals that come and haul out in the river. And so every week we go and take what's called a gigapan picture, so a really large format panoramic photo, and then they can take those photos and actually count the seals in them. So he was up here starting that project, and then we continue to take the photos throughout the summer and even into the fall. I think we'll probably take the last one today.
Oh, fun.
Yeah.
That's exciting. Neat. Another thing that happens here in the summer is a large abundance of bugs or insects, and I know that can be a challenge working with the mosquitoes and everything, but I think it's usually pretty worth it.
Yeah, it's definitely worth it. You have to wear a lot of bug protection when you're going out,
Okay.
but it's actually a pretty good time of year to study. And we actually have people who are studying insects as well, because there's such a diversity of them here.
Oh, neat. And this is maybe a point where I'd like to pull in another panelist we have on board right now, Dr. Megan Owen, who some of you might have met in our earlier webcast this week. Maybe we'll get Dr. Megan Owen to join us. And Megan actually started her research career many years ago in this area. Can you tell the viewers a bit about that?
Absolutely. About 22 or so years ago, I was actually a pre-med major down in the lower 48 in the United States. And I had this amazing opportunity to come up here and do a research project as part of my biology degree. And I landed here in Churchill. I stayed at the Northern Studies Centre, which was amazing, and it absolutely changed my life. And I was lucky to get here sort of in the late spring when the tundra hadn't quite come back to life from the long winter. And then to see it change over the course of the spring and then into the summer, and to go from this sort of green-brown expanse into just this incredible mat of wildflowers and willows coming into bloom, and the amazing diversity of wildlife. And it was just really, really stunning to me. And of course there were the bears as well. So
Right.
as the summer progressed and the bears started coming ashore, just to see polar bears on land here and see this whole dynamic ecosystem come to life was life-changing for me.
Oh, that's nice. Well, we're so happy that you can come back. Maybe not at that time of the year as much,
Not
but
as much, no.
at least this time of the year.
Yeah,
so.
it's a true pleasure.
Oh,
Great
that's
to be
really
here.
great. This is a very special place. So after the summer starts wrapping up, so in late summer, usually end of August, early September, that's when some polar bear research takes place in this area. So the Canadian Wildlife Service comes out here. I was lucky enough to join them for our multiple field seasons. From about 2010 to 2014 up here, looking at bears of all different ages and sizes. We fly out in September. We go all across Wapusk National Park along the coast, and we're checking out where the bears are, and we are capturing them to see how big they are, to tag them, to monitor the population, and this is part of that really long-term study that's been going on here that's really, helped us learn a lot about polar bears just in general. They've taught us a lot, these bears up here, and it's quite a bit of fun, and it's great to be able to stay at the study center. It's really almost luxury fieldwork, just going back to a great meal and nice accommodations every night. For much polar bear research, and I'm sure Arctic research in general, accommodations, you might be up on a little island in the middle of nowhere in the high Arctic, and you're lucky to have, a roof over your head and a little trailer and just kind of reheating whatever food you were able to ship up. And it's still fun, but nothing really compares to the nice facility you guys have here. It's a pretty neat place. Pretty cool. One thing we wanted to bring up is there is a program, if anyone is interested in checking it out. They take all different ages, and LeeAnn, maybe you can talk a little bit about it. It's the Earthwatch program, and Earthwatch has a lot of really neat stuff happening up here.
Yeah, so Earthwatch is an organization that takes volunteers and people who would like to participate in research projects with different scientists. And so you can visit their website, and one of the options is to come to Churchill and work with us on some of our research projects here. So we do 10 teams a year in all the different seasons, and some of the teams are focused on teenagers. So if you're between 16 and 18, this is a really great opportunity for you to come and get some science experience and also visit us here in Churchill and maybe see a polar bear for yourself. We also do teams during the winter time, so if you're interested in getting experience doing winter snowpack measurements or permafrost measurements, doing work with trees. We also do wetland teams during the summertime, so you can see a picture of all our hip waders here hung up to dry during the summertime with some bug jackets there as well. We talked a little bit about bugs. Here's one of our weather stations that's part of our monitoring network. We have 13 of these stations in about a 40-kilometer square radius where we measure temperatures and ground temperatures. So it's really a long-term monitoring project that we're able to do in concert with Earthwatch, but also encouraging folks to come and visit us here and participate in a science project.
That is pretty neat. I encourage any of you to check that out if you're interested. LeeAnn, one of the things you just mentioned was permafrost. Can you tell us a little bit about what permafrost is? We've kind of touched on that over the last couple weeks, but I think it'd be really great for some viewers to know what it is and why monitoring it is so important.
Yeah, so permafrost is ground that's continually frozen at or below 0 degrees Celsius, and it has to stay that way for at least 2 years. So it's ground that's going to stay frozen. Now on top of the permafrost, there's actually an active layer zone that forms. So there is a zone that melts each summer and develops. So permafrost here in Churchill, we're very close to the line where we go from having continuous permafrost into what we call discontinuous or patchy permafrost. So it's not underneath all of the ground. So one of the things here in Churchill is over time the ground is actually warming. It takes a long time for that to happen, so we have to keep monitoring year after year ground temperatures to actually be able to see that. And we're lucky here, there was some sites that were put in the late 1960s, so we can compare to the temperatures that were taken at that point. So we were able to reactivate one of those sites, and we found about 0.4 degrees Celsius of warming in 40 years, which doesn't seem like a lot. When we're talking about permafrost that's already at about 0.8 degrees Celsius, it's not far to go before it might not be permafrost in some particular areas, or at least thinning of permafrost.
Right, interesting. And that's really highlighting the importance of those long-term data sets, especially when it comes to climate. We really need these 30, 40-year data sets to tell us what's going on. So that's pretty amazing that you guys have that history and that long-term stuff. Man, pretty cool.
Yeah, and to tie it back to polar bears as
Yeah.
well, I mean, having the study center, as you mentioned,
Yes.
for people to work out of has allowed that continual monitoring of the polar bear population here in western Hudson Bay.
Yeah, it really has. There's some great stories from the older biologists who, have been coming up and staying there for 30 or more years, and just what a great time they've had there over the years, and little adventures at the study center while they're studying polar bears. I think there's a story about a squirrel getting in or something like that. I don't know. It's always a good time there. Lots of fun.
As long as it's not a polar bear inside.
Right. We don't want a polar bear inside, but a squirrel's not so bad. Maybe. Well, I guess talking about people coming up and staying here, you have lived in Churchill now for 13 years. Can you maybe tell people a little bit about what it's just like living here? People are pretty interested in this so-called polar bear capital of the world, but there's a lot more than polar bears too here.
Yeah, so Churchill's a pretty small town. There's only about 850 people, so less than 1,000 people who live in Churchill. It's a community that's undergone a lot of change over time. So there used to be a military base here, and now it's mostly focused on tourism as well as transportation through the port of Churchill. So it's a really interesting and dynamic community to live in. Living in a tourist community is also interesting because there are so many people who come here to visit. So sometimes you feel like the world is coming to visit you. So there's lots of gift shops, there's hotels and restaurants that are open seasonally, a few that are open year round. But it's a real sense of community with the people who live here all the time. So all of the staff at the study center, there are 8 full-time staff at the study center. We all live in the community and are part of the community here. And it's a really fantastic place to live. I grew up in a very small town, or near a very small town in Ontario. So to me, it really feels like home, and people are really welcoming, which is great.
Oh, that is really nice. So we have a couple questions coming in from viewers. Joan G. would like a bit more description about the accommodations for visitors and the estimated costs. I know it really depends, but yeah, maybe she will come visit if you tell her a little bit more.
Yeah, sure. So it is dormitory style accommodation. So we have 21 rooms at the study center, and each room has 2 bunk beds in it. So in each room would be 4 people. There's also a desk and some closets for people to store stuff. And then the bathrooms are just down the hallway, gender-specific bathrooms and shower rooms as well. So it's a little bit looking like a college dorm or a hostel would be the best way to compare it to. For people who haven't maybe stayed in one of those before, it's not a hotel.
No, but it is very comfortable, and you can fit a lot of people in there very comfortably with, you know, space and not feeling like you're bumping into people. There's a lot of lounge areas. There's an outside deck that you can go hang out outside above the ground very safely. There's the Aurora Dome room, so you can hang out in there and then walk up into the dome area to view the northern lights. There's also a lounge movie room with the TV, and you guys have a really cool selection of videos and stuff there. It's quite a neat place.
Yeah, it's sort of like having your house and all your friends being able to come and stay with you. A little bit about the cost, I think, was the rest of that question, Alyssa. The costs or the fees are on our website at churchillscience.ca. For school group programming, we try to subsidize those costs so that a field trip of students would be able to come. For researchers, it's about $70 a night, and that includes the food as well, so accommodation and 3 meals a day to stay at the study center.
Nice.
But if you want the details, you can definitely check out the website.
Great, and that was churchillscience.ca?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, check that out, anyone who is interested. So we have a question. Third grader Isabella would like to know how many polar bears live in the Churchill area. I can talk about that. So we think that the population in this whole area, so the western Hudson Bay polar bear population, goes from about the border between Manitoba and Nunavut down to the border of about Ontario and Manitoba. So this population does have quite a large spread, and we think there's anywhere from 900 to 1,000 polar bears in that population, so it would kind of be that lower on your right, the pinkish red population there next to the blue one. In the actual Churchill region, it probably fluctuates quite largely, and especially at this time of the year, there would be the most nearby to the town, but not quite the full 900 or 1,000 hanging out right here anyway. They like to spread out a little bit more than that, but if we're just looking at that population compared to Churchill, it's roughly a 1-to-1 ratio of people to bears.
Yeah, and
cool.
I think the other day the helicopter pilot said we're flying from where we are today, like to the town of Churchill, which is about 25 kilometers, they saw 60 polar bears.
Woo!
Which is a lot.
That is a lot. They are ready to get on that sea ice. Man, that's exciting.
Wow.
So, we have another, we have a question from the Radisson School in Winnipeg. Why can't we see polar bears around Winnipeg? Do they just walk wherever they like? Well, there's no sea ice in Winnipeg, and that's the biggest thing for polar bears is sea ice is their habitat, and so they really need that to go hunting, and that's where they want to be. So I don't think a polar bear would make its own way down to Winnipeg just because there's no sea ice and seals there for them to eat. So maybe you can come up north to see polar bears because I don't think they're going to come down to see you. But there are polar bears at the Assiniboine Zoo in Winnipeg, and there's a wonderful polar bear exhibit there, and you can check that out maybe with your parents. I encourage it. It's pretty cool. So one thing I would like to ask you about, so there's all these researchers coming up here, there's all sorts of neat stuff going on, but you must run into challenges in this sort of environment. What are the biggest challenges you face doing Arctic fieldwork?
Yeah, I think one of the really big challenges with doing Arctic fieldwork is the cold. It's not necessarily particularly cold outside today, but in a few weeks from now it could be as cold as -40, and that's when your technology is really challenging to work with. Your phone or computer is really going to be difficult, and a lot of things are easily broken during that time as well, and it's just a challenging time. You've got so many clothes on, you gotta have your big Canada Goose parka on to be able to go out there, and a lot of the work we do in the wintertime is by snow machine, so we're quite remote in a lot of cases as well. So the cold is just a really challenging place to work in, and it's one of the things I really enjoy about working here is that it's not necessarily cold all the time.
Right.
It does change, but the cold is a challenge I like to deal with.
Yeah, that's cool. It's hard for me in the cold. It's when you have to take field notes and your fingers just don't want to work or do what your brain's trying to tell them to, and you kind of end up with very scrawled field notes that I then rewrite later when my hands are warm.
Yeah, and you definitely have to go back to paper and pencil for taking notes. Like there's really nothing else at this point.
The
that
pens
will
aren't
really...
they're gonna freeze right up.
Yeah. Yeah, and your battery's not going to last very long
Right.
for a computer or for taking pictures and things like that. So
Right.
it does become a real challenging environment. And I think you guys have challenges with your technology as well.
We do, yeah, which you were helping us with this winter. So those Cape cameras that are out on Cape Churchill there, they have, is that right, the methanol fuel cell to help keep them warm and keep them running, but it was just the cold was just sapping them, and we couldn't keep them filled fast enough, and the batteries kept dying. But we've been working on solutions for that this year, and we will see how it goes. I know that you were you snowmobiling out there to check on them in the winter?
Yeah, it's about a 2-hour trip by
Oh,
snow
man.
machine to get
Yeah.
from the study center out to the tower, and then climbing up the tower in the cold and getting generators running
gosh.
so that we could actually warm up the tower to be able to warm up the fuel cell. And then the really great thing out there though is we were actually able to talk to you guys and get some backup
That's cool.
support as well.
BJ, I'm sure, mostly.
Yeah, fantastic support out there.
Yeah.
So those are
Oh,
some of the
good.
services that we're able to offer through the study center because we are here all the time. So people can call us up and ask to check on their equipment and to give them a hand. And we have the experience working in the cold and the tools to be able to do so. So it's a really great partnership.
That is, what a wonderful resource to have here. And this polar bear, this is live right now, so he's just outside. He is a thin bear, definitely. So I'm sure he's waiting for that sea ice to form, and he's out there having a good time rolling around on that sea ice. Yeah, waiting for it to cool down just a little bit more, it looks like. But we are really, really lucky to be talking to the study center today. Any of you students or teachers or adults who just need kind of a cool vacation, I really encourage you to check this place out. It is a lot of fun. It's just really, really interesting. No matter what time of the year you're here, there's always something cool going on, whether you're here in polar bear season or any of the other seasons. Okay, so we have a few other questions coming in. So West Dam, 4th grade, asks, what are most people researching at the center, and why do you have classrooms there? Can kids come?
Yeah, so I'll answer the first one about what do most people research. A lot of the research is focused on the natural environment. People who are interested in going out and looking at vegetation, for example, or wildlife, particular species. So that's the main focus. We do have social scientists who also come and stay because there is a community here, and there are also tourists who are visiting us as well. So we went through the seasons of Churchill and talked about some of the different research that goes on. So there's a lot of different projects, but predominantly they're focused on biology and ecology of the Arctic and transition zone here in Churchill.
And are the classrooms for kids to come or people to just learn in?
Yeah, the classrooms are multi-use space, so we can have a group of school kids. We just had the Duke of Marlborough, which is the Churchill school, come out and visit us, so we're able to do teaching seminars there. We can also do workshops. Some of the classrooms are used sometimes just for meetings, folks who want to come to Churchill and host a meeting here as well. So they're multi-purpose rooms, and definitely you can come to Churchill.
Cool.
And just give us a call or visit our website and get the information to contact us, and we can help you to organize a school field trip to Churchill and stay at the study center.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that. So it looks like we have a couple polar bear questions in, so we might pull in Nick Pilfold, who's
Sure.
also on the buggy, to talk a little bit about polar bears. We'll do a switcheroo here.
Tag.
All right. So for those of you that didn't see the earlier webcast this week, this is Dr. Nick Pilfold, postdoc fellow at the University of Alberta, who studies polar bears.
Hello, everyone.
So Nick, we're gonna fire a couple polar bear
Sure.
questions at you
Hit me.
here. All right. WSPS Library wants to know how many polar bear cubs are born each year, and they read that female polar bears aren't giving birth to as many babies.
That's a really good question. Trying to know how many polar bear cubs are born each year on a global scale is a very difficult thing to do because we don't have good monitoring on a lot of the populations. But for a really good population here that we've had monitored for a long time, the Western Hudson Bay, it's about 2 cubs per female right now. But only about a third of the females in the population are actually, of the adult females, are actually giving birth to cubs at any given time, because there's a long relationship between cubs and their mothers. So the first year that they have the cubs of the year, then they have yearlings, and it's about 2.5 years before the cubs go out on their own and they're ready to breed again. So it's actually only, each year about a third of the adult females maximum that are giving birth to cubs. And the other question was about litter size?
Yes.
Yeah, so this population was always famous for having triplets, and polar bears can have 3 cubs at a time, but we're seeing that a lot less frequently. And the overall litter size is tightly related to sea ice conditions and how long the sea ice is in the bay. And the shorter the sea ice is around, the less cubs these females are having.
Right. Polar bear health is definitely linked to the sea ice. And we see changes in the sea ice because of some human activities. So around the Earth, we have this blanket of carbon dioxide that traps warmth. And that's usually a really good thing. We're wearing parkas right now to stay at a nice temperature. But when we do things like we burn coal or oil for fuel, we are releasing these rampant amounts of carbon dioxide into the air. And that's just thickening that blanket and trapping too much heat. So I like this coat I'm wearing right now. If I added Nick's coat to me, and then I added LeeAnn's coat to me, I might get too warm too quickly. And that's simply what's happening to the Earth. But we can make sure that it doesn't get too warm. Let's help slow it down by reducing those greenhouse gases. Because of course we all know when it gets warm, ice melts. It's pretty simple. I'm sure you guys see that in the summer when you try to take your nice slushy or drink with some ice cubes outside and let it sit outside for a while. So it's very simple. We'll just make some changes to the energies we use. We've got different ones available these days. We've got solar and wind, and we can do all sorts of things to reduce our carbon footprint and help those polar bears and help people too, because we're also affected by changes. We really like our way of life right now, and the polar bears like their way of life, and let's just help protect this way of life and keep it around for future generations. So that's what we're up here to help talk about, is polar bears, but also all the other super cool research that's going on. So we've got a couple more questions, and then I think we're going to wrap up. This is kind of an interesting one. And Nick, I'll throw this over to you as well. So this is from Mr. Stocky, and he says, Kelsey, must be in his class, hi Kelsey, would like to know when polar bears are most aggressive and for what reasons.
Oh, really good question. Good question, Kelsey. So I would say polar bears are most aggressive in the mating season. So this is when the stakes are really high, especially for adult males. So like I was just talking about, there's only about a third of the adult females in the total population, give or take, that are available for breeding in the breeding season. And then you have a lot of males competing over those females for breeding access. So that's when they get really aggressive. That's when you see the big fights between the males. Right now in the fall, sometimes you get pictures of males sparring with each other, but it's really kind of light play fighting. They're just checking each other out, sizing each other up. There's no blood usually or anything like that, but in the spring, things can get aggressive. I would not want to be around an adult male during the breeding season in the
No,
spring.
definitely. Polar bears like their girlfriends, and they're willing to. That's why we see those big males with the scars on their faces.
Yeah.
That's almost always from another male polar bear.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then maybe the one last question, which is also, okay, we'll take 2 more questions. So this one's neat, and this is one of Nick's specialties. So this is from Mrs. Nesham's class in North Dakota, ND. Sorry, I'm Canadian here. But the question is, we are interested in the polar bears' diets throughout the season. So can you give a brief, maybe year-round look of what polar bears are eating?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we look at a population like this in western Hudson Bay, they get out on the sea ice in late November, early December, and they hunt seals from then until breakup. So they're looking at hunting ring seals, bearded seals. They'll maybe also get some harbor seals in there. Ring seals and bearded seals are primary prey item that they'll be going after. And they hunt those on the sea ice. So you're looking at some images there. That's a bearded seal that's hauled up on the sea ice. So polar bears will try to get in there and get after those bearded seals. They use a lot of really cool hunting techniques to try to capture bearded seals and ring seals. Once that sea ice breaks up though, then they're on land. And we do know, we've known for a very long time, that bears around here will eat a lot of different things on land. They'll eat berries, they'll eat kelp, they'll scavenge on dead caribou if they can find it. They'll go into goose colonies and eat the eggs. But what we know for certain, and what really seems to be happening now, is that we're really more certain all the time that the food is not very energetically dense. There might be a few bears in this population that get a little bit of an increase out of it, but on average, we're not seeing any sort of offset for the day-to-day mass loss rate. So what we're seeing in the summer is these bears are really kind of just hanging out, they're fasting, they're losing weight, and they're really waiting for that sea ice to come back so they can hunt seals. So it's a really good question.
At the end of the day, it's really seal fat that they're
It's really
going for.
seal fat, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's the primary thing. These bears, I think Andy Roche calls them fat vacuums. That's all they're going after is that fat. That's the primary thing that they like to eat, and it's really not available on land.
Right. And how cold, so Newberry wants to know, how cold is it where polar bears live? And I think that kind of depends where you are around the Arctic, what time of year. So for example, polar bears do live here year round in the summer, and in the summer it can get to 20, even, high 20s Celsius, and polar bears are here. But that's not their ideal, obviously. They do like the cold, and I know in some areas they're living, it can get down to minus 40 degrees Celsius, which I know is similar in Fahrenheit. I think minus 40 is the same.
Mm-hmm.
And so they really are cold weather animals, and they're adapted for that cold with their really thick fur and their thick layer of fat, amongst many other adaptations that allow them to use the sea ice habitat to find those seals that they need. So they are very comfortable when the temperatures drop, much more comfortable than you or I would be, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that the bears here are so well adapted that it's the reverse of what we generally think. For us, we think, man, when it gets cold, that's really hard. For them, it's kind of easy, actually.
Mm-hmm.
It's when it gets really hot for them that
Right.
it becomes problematic.
Yeah, they can definitely overheat, those bears.
Yeah.
If they're running when it's warm, or they're just not comfortable, they will overheat, definitely. And that's what we can see them they splay out their bodies. After sparring, actually, we might see it when two big males go at it. If they get too warm, they're going to go spread their bodies out, get their, between their legs and their bodies, put that on the cool snow, and then cool their bodies down. So,
Yeah,
pretty
and
neat.
during the summertime, you often see
Yeah.
them out just like lying in the kelp along the coast,
Aw.
just
Yeah.
trying to conserve energy as much as possible and just try to stay cool.
Yeah.
And they're also trying to stay away from the bugs as well.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, those bugs they don't care where they're getting flesh, I guess. Any animal will do,
Yeah.
human or bear. So we'll take one last question because I think this is a really important one. So Klykowski, sorry if I pronounced that wrong, the second graders want to know, what training or schooling do you need to become a polar bear scientist or like a northern scientist? So maybe you both could answer that if you don't mind. And then
Sure.
we'll wrap up. So LeeAnn, could you tell us?
Yeah, sure. I actually grew up on a dairy farm in southern Ontario. So I went to university and did a chemistry undergraduate degree. And I moved around a lot. I actually went then to an earth science for a master's program, and then into a geography department for my PhD, all working on geochemistry. So I'm really interested in nutrient dynamics and how they cycle. So I ended up getting a PhD and finding the job here at the study center where I could live and work at my field site. So that's my background.
Neat, great. And Nick?
My background is in wildlife, so I did an undergraduate degree in ecology at the University of British Columbia, and then I did a PhD at the University of Alberta looking at polar bear ecology, so that was another ecology degree. So I've been very focused sort of on the biology of the animals and their interactions with one another in the environment, and that's the way I got my education.
Excellent, thanks. And I also, I did a Bachelor of Science in Animal Biology and then a Master's in Ecology. And I think it's really important to remember that there are a lot of paths that can lead you to polar bears or anything else you might be interested in studying. I think it's really important to, get good at math, or at least don't be afraid of math. Math is pretty cool, and it really teaches us a lot about this world. And, there's different levels of math that you can use in research, but having a good base understanding is important. And also writing and just communicating. So if you're doing really cool research, but you don't know how to tell people about it, it can kind of get lost. So any sort of thing that you're doing with writing or talking to people and practicing those skills are really important. And just taking opportunities and trying new things. Whatever you're interested in, maybe try to volunteer to see if it suits you and if you want to go forward with it. But there's a lot of different paths to polar bears. So maybe we'll see you up here one day studying these polar bears, or maybe even in the higher Arctic. But we would encourage anyone to come check out Churchill and the Northern Studies Centre here. It's a pretty cool place, and thank you all so much for joining us today. Thank you for sending in your questions. Thank you for everything you are doing for polar bears, for taking action to keep polar bears in the Arctic always and reducing your carbon footprint. We have a Project Polar Bear for anyone who might be interested. It's a great project program. Different schools can take part. Different classrooms and ages are working on projects in their community and schools to reduce their carbon footprints. And this is a list of all the wonderful people that have joined so far. And we're really looking forward to seeing how it goes for the rest of the sign up period. We can't wait to see what projects are coming out. We would also encourage you to check out our iTunes U channel. You can go to itunes.com/polarbearsinternational for some really cool resources, videos, stuff for teachers, curriculum. It's really, really fantastic. And please, it would be wonderful if you could take our post-broadcast survey. We are really interested in what you have to say and in always improving our broadcasts. And for everyone that does one, you will be entered into a draw to win a free polar bear adoption, which is pretty cool. So thank you all for watching. Thanks for joining us throughout our Tundra Connection season. Stay tuned to our live cams. We're going to still have polar bears around for a while, and we're going to keep talking about them and keep talking to you as much as we can. So thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
We're going.